to today's session. Just to introduce myself, I am Thomas. I am the Program Director for the Higher Diploma for Legal Executives. And I welcome you to today's session where we'll talk about the process of starting a business. And the reason for this session is because you might be thinking about studying law with us. And I know that some students sometimes have concerns about studying law. They might think that studying law is very hard because it involves English. But if you can understand what I'm saying, you are most capable of studying law. It is not as difficult as you think. So this session is actually taken from a real-life law class. Many times, a client or a customer will come to a law firm and ask a lawyer or legal executive about starting their business. And this is probably the most common question you get asked as a legal professional. I'm thinking about starting a business in Hong Kong. How do I do it? You might have seen these advertisements where they say, please pay us $4,000 or $5,000 and we'll help you to start a business. But even before that question, we should talk about the different types of business in Hong Kong. And that's a really important question. So let's go for it together. So this is the typical question. I want to start a business. What are my options for a business association in Hong Kong? All right. And typically, for most businesses, you might have heard of this term before, a business plan. A business plan is where someone writes a kind of like a layout of what the business is going to be when they start. And a typical business plan will have several important sections, like, for example, where is the money going to come from? Is it going to come from investors? Are we going to borrow money from a bank? Are we going to get money from our own pocket, right, using our life savings? They might talk about the model of the business. Is it going to be like Uber? Or is it going to be like OpenRice? Is it going to be like an oil company? So what kind of business is it going to be? They might talk about strategy, marketing, competitors. But very important for the business plan is something called business associations, which means what exactly is going to be the legal vehicle for the business. All right. Is it going to be a company? Is it going to be a sole proprietorship? Or is it going to be a partnership? Well, what type it is really depends on what your needs are. And these are the main three types, as you can see here. 1, in green, a sole proprietorship. 2, in red, you can see, is a partnership. And C, a company, or if you like the American word, a corporation. Sometimes in life, we see these words being used interchangeably, and sometimes people swap these words. Sometimes when people say business, they mean a company. Sometimes when people say a firm, they mean a company. But in law, we should understand that we have to use words very precisely, very accurately. In law, a business doesn't just mean a company. As I mentioned before, it can mean a sole proprietorship, partnership, or a company. A firm only equals one thing, a partnership, like a law firm, accounting firm, etc. So let's talk about the very first type, a sole trader or a sole proprietorship. What does that mean? Well, you can see here, it means a single person. It doesn't mean a lady with 8 arms, right? It's there to symbolize that she's one person having to do many things. You can see here she's making coffee, she's answering phone calls, she's doing bookkeeping, mailing, because she is a one-person business. She is the business, all right? And she has to do many, many things. And it is the most common type of business in Hong Kong. If you look at a newspaper stand, it's going to be a sole proprietorship. If you look at someone polishing shoes in Central, sole proprietorship. Most restaurants, canteen, bars, cafes, they're most likely to be a sole proprietorship. And the reason for its popularity is because it is very simple. Simplicity is the main advantage of a sole proprietorship. And you can see in this table here, clearly laid out, these are the advantages and disadvantages of a sole proprietorship. Let's have a look at the left-hand side, the advantages. 1, it is very easy to set up. All you need is basically fill in a form with your Hong Kong ID card, pay some money, and you're done. And it's very easy to make business decisions. Why is that? Because you're only one person and therefore more efficient. You're one person, you don't have to share any of the money that you make. And you have a very close relationship with your customers. Think about all these restaurants or canteen that has been open for many, many years. The boss knows the customers very well. What about some of the disadvantages, some of the bad things about a sole proprietorship? 1, think about where you're going to get your money from. Most likely yourself, maybe some money from a bank. But if you're an investor, this would not be very attractive because the sole owner is the 100% owner of the business. Why would you invest in a business if you have no part in the business? 2, because you're the single person, it's very hard to ask for help. You can ask someone, an employee, to help you, but ultimately you're the boss, you're responsible. And the really bad thing is unlimited personal liability. What does that mean? You are the business. If something goes wrong in the business, someone gets sick, someone gets food poisoning, someone gets hurt in a restaurant, you are responsible and you can lose all your money, your house, your apartment, your car. All right? So it can be a big disadvantage. All right? And that is what we call a business certificate, right? Every business, no matter what type it is, should have one of these, right? To symbolize that they are a business. Let's talk about the second type, a partnership. So you have many kinds of businesses, but if you look at law firms, all right, and accounting firms, okay, so law firms are basically the business of lawyers. Accounting firm is where accountants run a business to help other businesses do the books and finances. Most of them are what we call partnerships, because in the law, they have to be in a form of partnership. So let's look at the law. I know that, this might seem scary, but it's not. If you look at section 3.1 of the partnership law, it talks about a partnership very simply. A partnership is basically people carrying on a business together and they are making a profit. Okay, so basically some people coming together and they're running a business and they want to make a profit. Okay, so let's look at the pros and cons once again of having a partnership. More people means more money. Capital means money, right? So more people, you have, instead of one person, you have 5 people, so you have 5 times the money. It's much easier to get other people to give you money, right? If one person asks for a loan, it's hard. If 5, 6, 10 people ask for a loan, it's easier. And it's very easy to set up. All you need is for people to agree. More people means more people share the burden of running a business, and more people to share the potential liability. And you have more people sharing the skills and knowledge of running a business. But there are some bad things. One, you have what we call unlimited personal liability. The same thing that we talked about for sole proprietorship. All right. Each partner is also liable for the business debts. The firm is not a separate legal person. It is not something which is like a company. All right. Think about McDonald's. Think about, Uber. Uber is separate from, the founder. McDonald's is separate from McDonald, all right? So Li Ka-shing is separate from his companies, Hutchinson Whampoa. And Steve Jobs, even though he's passed away, Steve Jobs is not Apple, right? They're two separate things. And more people means more potential for disagreements, conflict. And you need to discuss with your partners before making a business decision. An agreement by one partner is binding on everyone. So you have to be very careful on what the partners agree to and who your partners are. Let's talk about companies. And I think everyone here should be familiar with companies. And there are many kinds of companies. There are, telecommunication companies, shipping companies, right? Many kinds of companies. Is Hong Kong U a company? It is a company. And you might be surprised because non-profit organizations can also be companies. You can see here, if you do a search on the government registry, 公司註冊處, you can see that by doing a search, you can find out Hong Kong U is a company. Hong Kong U Space is also a company. We are a non-profit company limited by guarantee. So there are many kinds of companies. People use companies for business. People use a company to buy property. People use a company for investment, for non-profit purposes, and even to carry on government businesses. All right, so there are many kinds of companies and they're very versatile. So if you look at the idea of a company, it's basically very simple. It is what we call a legal entity. All right, it's like a legal person. It's like a robot. All right, and that artificial person, a company, has all the rights and duties of a natural person. A natural person is you and me, all right, human beings. So a company has all the things that a human being would have. But unlike a human being, a company can live forever. Think about Steve Jobs. He died 11 years ago, but Apple still continues. The Colonel from KFC died a long time ago, but we still have KFC, right? But a company, unlike a person, the shareholders of a company have limited liability. So if you buy some shares and if something goes wrong with the food at McDonald's, you're not personally responsible. McDonald's is responsible. If you look at one type of company in Hong Kong, the most popular type of company, you can see that there are good things and bad things about a company. And this is the most popular type in Hong Kong. Private limited company. 私人有限公司, private limited company. Let's look at the advantages. Limited liability. As I mentioned before, only the shareholders would be, the shareholders will not be responsible. Only the company will be responsible. The company can live for a long, long time. The company doesn't die. And it's much easier for companies to obtain money because they can ask people to invest in the company. The company is separate from the owners. Just because you buy one share in, for example, HSBC, doesn't mean you are HSBC, right? It's separate. And it's much easier for people to buy and sell shares comparing to asking someone to become a partner. The ownership and management are separate. Just because you buy some shares doesn't mean you are the director. Just because you're the director of a company doesn't mean that you are a shareholder. These two things are separate. Let's talk about some bad things because there are always some negatives, right? Some bad things include that you have to disclose information to the public. What does that mean? When you form a company, there are some forms you have to fill, some disclosure you have to make, your name, your address, your Hong Kong ID card, etc. Right? So you have to give some information to the public. And forming a company is a little bit more expensive and a little bit more complicated than, say, a sole trader or a partnership. And you have to be careful because you have to follow the company law. There's a word that you might have heard of before called corporate governance, right? So this is basically, you need to comply with the law when you're running a company. And a company is a little bit more complicated to close down as well. You know, you might have seen some companies which have closed down and they need to hire people to help them because the company needs to go through a special process called liquidation. Okay, so I know there's a lot of information to take. I know this is the first time you might have encountered studying law. I hope this hasn't been too complicated, but let us apply what you've learned to real life. So let me show you a very typical law question. So this is a very, very typical law question. Whether you're studying law at Hong Kong U with us, or in a law course in an MBA program, wherever in the world, this is a very, very typical law question. Let's have a look. There are three ladies here, Mary, Maple, and Martha, and they are thinking about carrying on a business, serving food, catering, right? And they all want to manage the business, but they are worried and want to avoid personal liability. They are worried that the arrangements be kept as private, as secret as possible because they value the privacy. And in the future, they want to be able to transfer the interest in the business without difficulty. What does that mean? Well, in the future, if the business is doing well, they might want to sell it to someone else. For example, Instagram. The founders of Instagram sold the business to Facebook for $1 billion. So they're thinking about doing that. If the business is successful, they want to sell the business. So let's not worry about tax law. You as a lawyer, imagine you're the lawyer and you have to advise them what would be the best type of business associations. Okay, so let's look at what we've learned. We talk about business associations. 3 types. What are they? 1, a sole proprietorship. 2, a partnership. 3, a company, right? So what do you think would be best for them? You might have an idea. You might say, well, there are 3 people, so it can't be number 1, right? It can't be a sole proprietorship because there are 3 people and a sole proprietorship is only 1. Which leaves us to only 2 other options. A partnership or a company. So what's the best type? Well, let's have a look. They all want to manage the business. So a partnership and a company will allow them both to manage the business. But they want to avoid personal liability. A company would be better for avoiding personal liability because a company is separate from the owners of the business. But they are worried about secrecy. They want things to be private. A partnership is more private because you don't have to tell the public anything, unlike a company. And if you want to transfer the interest in the business, you want to sell the business at some future point in time, what is better? Well, I will suggest a company is better. You can see people buying and selling shares every day. So all in all, a company will be better for these ladies here. So that's it. This is basically the study of law. I hope this has been informative. I hope this hasn't scared you off from studying the law. It's actually quite easy. It's not that hard. If you understand what I'm saying, you're most capable of studying the law. And the great thing about this program is the High Diploma for Legal Executive is that it is recognized by the Hong Kong Law Society. And also, we know for many of our students, they've gone on to study law programs, both in Hong Kong and overseas, and they've been very successful. So if you're thinking about joining the legal profession, if you want to think about being a legal executive, which is an assistant to a lawyer, or even becoming a lawyer in the future, this is the best path to take. So come and join us. If you have any questions, please ask me or one of our staff. So I'm going to take some questions if there are any questions. So I'm welcoming any questions that you might have about this or about anything else you might like to ask me. So okay, we have a question here. What are the duties of a legal executive? Well, that's a very good question. Okay. Well, a legal executive is basically an assistant to a lawyer. They do many things. They help to draft contracts, they help to give advice to clients, and sometimes they even go to court. So they do almost everything a lawyer does. It's like basically a nurse and a doctor, right? The legal executive being the nurse. But don't think just because you're a legal executive that you can't go on to become a lawyer. Many legal executives start in that position, and as they get more experience, they, go through and do a JD or LB, and they become a lawyer. I hope that answers your question. Another question, can I study a JD after the High Diploma for Legal Executives? Yes. So I've seen students where they go to study the High Diploma, and my recommendation is that it is much better for someone to finish the High Diploma and perhaps get a top-up degree of some sort and then apply for a JD. And many of our students understand that a JD is quite expensive. There are other choices available at Hong Kong U Space. For example, we have the wonderful University of London LB program. We also have the very affordable graduate diploma in English and Hong Kong law, which is an alternative to a JD. So there are many, many pathways to becoming a lawyer, not just a JD, LB, CPE, and there are many options available for you. And if you're interested, you can come and see us or talk to us and we can give you more details. But the HDLE provides a wonderful foundation for starting to study law. I just want to add one more thing. There are not that many law programs at this level designed for full-time students. And the HTLE program is one of the few programs in Hong Kong that is recognized by the Hong Kong Law Society and is, again, a very good pathway towards becoming a legal professional in Hong Kong. Okay, well, if there are no more questions, I'm going to sign out. But of course, I welcome all questions that you might have. You can simply, we have a HPSHCC Facebook webpage. We also have a Hong Kong U Space page. We have a Hong Kong U Space Law page, Instagram, YouTube, phone, the traditional way, even email. If you want to ask us anything, please do so. Or, come and see us by appointment anytime. So thank you very much. And, I look forward to seeing you in class. Thank you.